local cable channel 1303 or via the internet by going to townhallstreams.com and selecting Bucksport. You can email questions or comments prior to or during the meeting to sbessard@bucksportmaine.gov or call during the meeting at 469-7368. First item on the agenda is call of the roll. Ed Rankin.
Here.
Mark Eastman.
Here.
Paul Bissonnette is here as well. Next item on the agenda is AIM landfill proposal.
Just as an introduction, you folks all have a memo that I did that outlined where we were at the present time. This is also posted on our website, and a link or where to find it was posted on our Facebook page. So Dave Bryant, who is AIM's representative, is with us via our remote meeting process tonight. Dave, for those of you who remember our former AIM representative, he's no longer with the company, but Dave has taken over Jeff's role plus some other things. So he's here this evening to explain the proposal and answer questions that the committee may have, and our audience attendees may have about this. So Dave, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Sue. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you all virtually. I know I've been to Bucksport a few different times, and other than Sue and Rich, I don't know that I've really met many of the folks on the town council, so this is a great opportunity. So just to sort of set the table background-wise, I got involved with AIM in late 2014 when AIM was looking at potentially acquiring the Verso mill. And I was brought in along with my partner, Kyle Menninger, to work with AIM to assist in structuring a deal where they could acquire that mill, which obviously it had been announced that the mill was going to shut down. For those of you who don't know AIM as well as the folks that obviously have been involved in working with us over the last number of years, AIM is a large multinational firm that's engaged in metal recycling primarily. One of its business lines is to acquire defunct or shut down industrial sites like the Verso paper mill and then go through a process to demolish buildings that are no longer useful, to recycle the metal that's associated with those buildings, and then recover whatever materials may have economic value and sell off components that were part of the operations. So when AIM acquired Verso's operations in Bucksport in we closed on the deal in early 2015, there was really only a couple of operating facilities that were part of that. One was the power plant, which in its then configuration was not really economic. It had to be modified in order for it to be a continuing economic enterprise in the current market. My expertise is in energy and power primarily. I was a banker and helped, work with utilities and independent power companies to build and acquire these types of facilities. Really was
You're frozen.
Elected to sell that. Hand in hand with Jeff McGlynn, who Sue referenced, was the previous site manager. Jeff's responsibility and his expertise was to man demolition. Involved in that, my partner and I were really, just to
David,
make sure that that the activities that he was pursuing were not inconsistent with the desire to set the power plant up and run it separately. The other
David?
operating facility,
David,
AIM
hello.
retained,
You're breaking up. I don't think you can
which I
hear
think
me either.
Silver Lake, Pelican, and High, which fly water to the mill site.
There was a big snowstorm. Wonder where he is.
If you can hear me, I'm gonna try dialing in. I'm in a rural area, so I'm up there, and can you see me okay?
So at the moment, you may want to call in.
Yeah, let me try.
There you go. We know what he looks like.
What's that?
We know what he looks like.
Worst case scenario is just get rescheduled so we can come here. There it is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I still have the picture here, but I've muted my my screen, so hopefully you can hear me all right, and I'll just continue. And just give me a hand sign or flip me off or whatever if I'm going off screen here. So where I was, I just wanted to sort of set the table that AIM has, gone through a process where that site has been largely remediated. As you know, property's been sold to Hull Oceans for the development of the salmon farm. The administration building was sold to Maine Maritimes, which it now uses. And there are several other ancillary buildings which have been sold to third parties. So AIM has retained ownership of the water supply system, which it continues to have responsibility for. It also owns and operates or manages the landfill, which is the subject of tonight's conversation. And that landfill, since the cessation of operations of the paper mill, has been used only for deposit of construction debris that was the result of demolition from the facilities on the site. So as AIM has evaluated that site, the one thing that became clear to us as we got to better understand what the waste processing operations in Maine is that there are a limited number of sites available to receive the type of waste that AIM was depositing in there as a result of its own demolition activities. And there are, Sue, I think you're probably more familiar than I am, but there are certainly even bigger impediments to building new facilities that would be able to accept that type of a waste stream. And I guess I want to stop right here and say that the waste stream that AIM contemplates putting into that landfill is significantly different than what that landfill was used for when the paper mill was operating. There are very limited, if any, volatile organic compounds that will go into the landfill, which means, if you just pick up trash at the curb and dump that into the landfill, 30% of that's going to wind up being organic matter, and that's where odor and deteriorating components can get into the groundwater. That type of waste stream is not part of the construction and demolition waste stream that would be going into this prospectively, and certainly not the kind of waste stream that AIM was depositing in the landfill. So as AIM has spent time with its council to understand what the regulatory requirements are for running a landfill of this sort, it's become clear that the most efficient and perhaps the only way to really accomplish commercializing that existing landfill is to partner with a municipality such as Bucksport, which obviously makes sense since it's in your backyard and something that could have potential mutual value to you and to AIM. So we have come up with the idea of a public-private partnership between AIM and the town of Bucksport, whereby the town would wind up being the owner of the landfill. AIM would have responsibility for commercializing the operations. The town would be the beneficiary of certain revenue stream associated with the waste that goes into the landfill, and also have the ability to dispose of a portion of its construction and demolition waste on an annual basis. So that's the essence of the underlying public proposed, and for various reasons we've had conversations about this for a number of years, but pandemic and other matters have certainly delayed our ability to get it to this point. So just AIM itself retains the ownership of the landfill, which it does manage on a day-to-day basis. We have a party who actually does daily inspections. We continue to monitor the groundwater that comes through the leachate system there. We have responsibilities and regulatory requirements that we're required to meet, and we do that on a daily basis. We also have to file periodic reports with the Maine DEP to confirm that we're operating that within the guidelines of the regulations that have been set out for us. We also have responsibility for the water system, as I mentioned. We do that in partnership with the personnel at Bucksport Generation, who have folks that have had long-standing familiarity with that facility, and they do that via contract to AIM to make sure that those dams and so forth are operated per regulations. But in addition to that, and outside of Bucksport, AIM has 4 other sites within the state of Maine. We do have a continuing commitment to North America in terms of AIM's investments, and frankly, we're not going anywhere. We want to optimize the investments that we have, and this landfill represents one of those opportunities for us to potentially optimize something for the mutual benefit of the company and also for its host community, Bucksport. So, Sue, I don't know if that covers enough, or if you want to hear more about kind of what AIM's objectives would be. I can tell you just sort of what we see the landfill being able to accomplish over the next number of years, if that's helpful. The landfill was originally built to take exclusively the waste stream from the paper mill, as I mentioned. The components that would have been coming out of that waste stream were certainly more environmentally unfriendly than what would be going in there in in the prospective environment. In the operation of the landfill, AIM would partner with a local operating partner. We've had some conversations with folks, but for confidentiality reasons, I'd obviously not want to disclose who exactly we've spoken with, other than we would bring in a partner who is in the daily business of accepting and disposing of waste. The operations of the facility would contemplate that we would be receiving 6 to 8 semi-trailer truckloads of already sorted construction and demolition debris that would come in from transfer stations around the state that would already have the less benign waste sorted out and recycled at the transfer station. So what we would be receiving would be stuff that would be relatively odorless and would obviously have less adverse effect on the local community. The other thing to note is that this is not going to be an operation where we're receiving roll-off trucks or the typical garbage trucks that would pick up garbage at the curb. This is kind of a step removed from that whole process. In terms of employment, we would have a site manager, a local operator who would run some of our heavy equipment, and we would have a laborer. But beyond that, the changes of employment at the site itself would be fairly limited. This is not a large employer that's going to have 50 people crawling all over the landfill or anything like that. There would be some administrative folks in the background who would deal with regulatory compliance matters and accounting and finance and that sort of thing. But in terms of visibility to the community, you'd basically see 3, I'll call them new people, although we may repurpose some of the people that are currently involved in the operation to work with us. So with that, I guess I would stop, and I'm sure I haven't covered everything, but I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Thank you, Sue. Or
other than this whole process would certainly involve where we have access to all of the well results testing things. I have checked the PFAS levels that for testing that has been done at this site. The PFAS levels and the leachate are 13 and 14 of the results that have been done. The drinking water standard is 20. And the reason that PFAS and at this site is so low in the leachate is due to the type of coatings of paper that were used here as opposed to those that were used at sites where it was waterproofing and those kind of things in terms of the paper. I spoke with DEP about that specifically because PFAS has been identified in a number of areas. That isn't an issue here, but the other thing as proposed was that in this public-private partnership, the landfill, although owned by the town, the liability for anything that had been deposited in that landfill prior to this and anything put in it during this would be the responsibility of AIM and not the responsibility of the town. That the liability issue for permitting waste, anything that was ever identified in some future iteration would not be the liability of the town. It would be the liability of AIM. And Mr. Bryant explained that since the mid-'80s, it's not been legal to establish a new commercial landfill in the state of Maine by a private entity. There's one commercial landfill in Maine right now, and that's in Norridge Walk. And that's a landfill that accepts municipal solid waste and all sorts of things that are not here. But there are many, but municipal landfills are allowed, and many communities in the state have landfills. They are not construction and demolition debris landfills. They're generally landfills that serve their own community's needs for the disposal of solid waste, as well as that. Mr. Bryant is correct. Landfill space for this purpose is limited in the state. There's virtually none in our region. Ours is shipped away at the cost of $150 a ton. That is because there's nowhere close to send it. And the reason that I brought this to the council was because even though it's a contentious subject, I think it's a subject that needs to be discussed. The landfill that's located in Bucksport is a licensed facility with licensed capacity. And whether Bucksport chooses to partner for that, there's nothing in state law that says that they could not partner with another municipality for that purpose. That said, this isn't a hostage situation either. It's a proposal that has a number of things that I think we should just talk about, at least as a community, and whether or not this is something that is we see as part of the future, and or we don't. That's certainly a question. This is an introduction of the subject. It's not there's a whole process that would have to go if you referred it to the council for further discussion that would include public hearings and all manner of other and additional information that would be necessary to do that. But I think Mr. Bryan has pretty well outlined what AIM's goals are, and in the memo that I put out, I identified why I brought it and why it. We're Bucksport. We can talk about anything. That we should be able to have a discussion on this topic. So we have
from the. I'm going to have questions from the council and then go to the public.
One of the biggest concerns I'm hearing about is, I know it's stated there'll be no out-of-state waste that will be guaranteed, and it says it'll be service the region. What exactly is the region?
The region would be the state of Maine. Most of the construction waste that, as I understand it at least, and Sue, feel free to correct me on this, I think one of the big problems is that there's waste that's generated towards the coast in areas that have high economic activity, construction activity, that, there's difficulty disposing of it because they have to haul it a significant distance. In fact, some waste is being hauled well past Bucksport on its way to its ultimate destination just based on what landfill capacity is available. So Bucksport would present an alternative, a cost-effective alternative to the disposal of construction debris from sites that otherwise are spending an inordinate amount on transport to get it to a location that's been approved for receipt of this type of stuff. But again, our relationship will be with transfer stations that are located within the state of Maine. All the sorting of waste will take place at that point. Anything that is not suitable for our landfill will have already been recycled and removed from the waste stream. And what we're getting is, it sounds crazy, but more of a clean stream of waste that's actually going into this facility. And that will be state of Maine generated waste.
And Ed, to your question, there's a whole definition issue of what's Maine waste. It comes across the line and it gets sorted and then it becomes Maine, and that's not what we're talking about. The origin of the waste is in Maine, not it came from somewhere else to Maine and then got sorted and is now Maine waste, which is a current definition in Maine law, and the legislature has been trying to address that for some time with the facility, but this facility would be not. The easiest way to say what this is to go up to our transfer station and look in the containers at the end of the plant. That's construction and demolition debris. It includes there's no other disposal method for this waste. It can't be burned. It's not something that's going to go to a facility if the one in Hamden ever works, and it's not PERC material either. So it's material that needs a home in a landfill. But as I said, for people who have asked me what it is, I have directed them to the transfer station to look in the bins at the end, because that's what we're talking about.
Any questions?
You had said initially, Sue, that we would retain ownership after the capacity is met. Is that a requirement? Or can it revert back to AIM after?
That would be a negotiation. I mean, the current license capacity is 400,000 cubic yards, and some of that is used because the mill used it. There's an additional 700,000 cubic yards that is permitted for use, which sounds like a whole lot, but in terms of the tonnage that goes into it and how much this stuff weighs, the estimate has been 10 to 12 years is what the life of this proposal would be. But I would imagine it would be a negotiation as to, if it's for the purpose of the ability to operate and they retain the liability, that the turnover back to it of ownership at the end is a reasonable proposal.
Right. Mr.
Right.
Bryan,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead and address that, and then I have two questions that I want to give people in the public the chance to ask some questions.
You bet. So the concept is that AIM understands, as the current owner, it understands it has the liability associated with this landfill. It also understands that the town of Bucksport stepping into this via this public-private partnership is not inclined, nor would anyone, frankly, be inclined to step in and assume the liabilities associated with what has happened and what's already there. So everybody who's been involved in this up to this point, including the prior owners, Verso and Champion Paper and whoever else, still has theoretical liability for what actually has gone into that landfill. What we're proposing, and going forward, any relationship between AIM and the town of Bucksport would be structured in a way so that the liability, the financial liability associated with the operations of the landfill are retained by AIM, not something that the town is stepping in the middle of. So Sue's made that point a couple of times, and I just want to reiterate that is the concept. We agree with that, and how we accomplish that financially via the agreement is obviously the devil in the details, but that's something that we understand is kind of a fundamental part of this transaction. So I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt. Ask away.
Oh, I had two questions, and they're really just points of clarification, I think. The first is when you were talking about, you mentioned the construction debris from Bucksport could be brought to this landfill, and you phrased it as a portion of. Was that a reference to the type of material that can be brought there, or is there a limitation on how much of this particular type that we're talking about from Bucksport could go there?
The concept, first of all, I think Bucksport generates 250 to 300 tons of construction and demolition waste a year. I believe the concept that has been discussed is 200 tons per year would be able to be deposited in the landfill with no payment to AIM. Now, obviously, there's a cost associated with getting the debris to the landfill. That's not our issue. We don't provide that service, or would not intend to provide that service. And how Bucksport does that is that's not really covered or contemplated in the partnership. But you would have the ability to deposit without tipping fee up to 200 tons per year of that sort of debris. So basically, think of that as a freebie, if you will. And then in addition to that, there would be a royalty stream because other parties will be dumping debris into the landfill that's, suitable, and will pay for that. A portion of that revenue stream would be dedicated to the town of Bucksport for its role in the public-private partnership. And that's on a per-ton basis.
I was going to say that these kind of are the negotiations.
Sure. No. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear just what was being said. I certainly understand that. And then the other thing was you had mentioned 6 to 8 semi-trucks of this material will be coming through, but you didn't mention in what time frame.
I'm sorry. That would be per day. That's the estimate, and that. Again, it's a function of economic activity, right? If there's not a lot of demolition/construction activity going on, then that could be less. We would not really envision it to be more than that just because the throughput at the landfill would limit what we could receive on a daily basis. And by the way, that's 5 days a week. That's not 7 days a week. So the advantage to receiving semi-trucks as opposed to the smaller compacting garbage trucks is obviously you limit the amount of traffic, for one. That there then eliminates the amount of dust and particulate matter that may get stirred up as a result of the trucks coming in and out of the landfill. So our thought is that probably provides the minimal amount of disruption to any of the surrounding area. And it's the landfill itself is a fairly good-sized area. Our expectation is that the dust would be somewhat limited as it is, and we would be putting daily cover over that to minimize that in any event.
Anything from the council before? But several members of the public I've seen hands from already, so I'll let you. I saw Meg. I'm pretty sure I saw you first. So yeah, so people would just please come up to the microphone so the folks at home can hear you.
With my hands. Okay. I'm slow.
No problem.
It's really a pretty simple question.
Our next iteration is going to get a traveling mic so that people don't have to, but this is the only way people at home can hear you.
It's okay. I just really wanted clarification on the type of waste, and I'm presuming that it's an assortment of metals, wood, broken concrete chunks, and like that. I should have gone up to the landfill, the dump, and looked to see in that area there, but I haven't. Are there any other types? Is that the type of waste? And are there any other types of waste that would be going in there?
It's really what's left over after all of the waste that has some other recyclable in-purpose associated with it has been taken out of the stream. So that's what the transfer station does. It kind of sorts all that stuff, and whatever is left over, wood typically would come out of that, but we could wind up with some bits of wood, some bits of concrete, some asphalt shingles as an example,
It's of metal.
plastics, some pieces of metal, although, AIM is in the business of recycling metal, and frankly, the transfer station is probably going to pull out anything that has any value before it ever gets to the landfill. But whatever is left over after that whole sorting process takes place is what would, I think Sue said it best earlier, it's what can't really be used for any other purpose and therefore lends itself only to, to burying in a landfill. That's basically what we wind up with. But it's not the kind of material that you would see in, the normal garbage pickup that you undoubtedly have at Bucksport. It's not going to be a big heaping, smelly mess of organic matter.
I think I'll go take a look at what's in the big can.
The landfill would be licensed to accept certain things, construction and demolition debris that it may be dirty soil. It may be soil that was contaminated and that needs to go, but it's inert material that, as he said, it isn't, I love this term, vector attracting putrescible waste, which is.
But I understand the term.
But birds and smelly stuff, which
Right.
is the technical way to, but because as discussed, the need is construction and demolition debris landfill space. Right now, Juniper Ridge is bearing the brunt of the state-owned landfill of not just that, but all the municipal solid waste that is generated all over the place. But that is the waste stream. The things I can think of are construction and demo or dirty soils, which are sometimes have to be disposed of, but this is a lined construction system with a leachate extraction system and leachate pond, so that it isn't a directly on the ground construction.
So it is lined?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. I might take a look at it. Oh.
We'll have all these people
That's
visiting the
Yeah.
transfer station to look in the.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll bring pictures next time.
Oh, good. I have the same question as the previous woman did. It's a little bit more specific, though. When this matter is brought in, there's definitely some type of a list that states what needs to be taken out of it and what is going to be allowed to be put into this new landfill, or the landfill that we're discussing. I'd like to see a list of the contaminants that are allowed, listed, that are allowed to go into this landfill. And I understand that they're being called inert, but I also know that right now we have $1 million project going on to dredge the river and then to contain it with cement because of the contaminants that we have. So I'm not excited about another source. I'm just being very plain spoken about it, not meaning to be, out there or anything, but that's my main concern. And I think it's a concern of a lot of people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking about it. They wouldn't be here. So I think it's important that we're very clear about what we're actually allowing to come into our town and what the dangers could be, as opposed to just what kind of money we can make by accepting this kind of a project. That's what I wanted to say.
Sure. Okay. We can certainly get a list of what would be allowable per the permit, or excuse me, through the permit for the landfill, and obviously that is all going to be spelled out once if this were agreed to and there were a transfer of the permit for the landfill, obviously all of that's going to be spelled out from a regulatory perspective. But yes, it's a reasonable question, and we can get you a list of what contaminants are allowed to be dumped into this. And again, I would just emphasize, what's coming into this landfill is not unsorted material. This is material that already has been dealt with at a DEP-regulated transfer station before it ever gets to us. So we're kind of the second line of defense, if you will.
The other thing that I would note is landfills are heavily regulated by the DEP, and the what can go in it in terms of the contaminants and in terms of what material can contain is specified by that as well. So getting you that information will not be a problem in terms of what the allowable materials would be and what risk factors there are associated with them.
So Sue, just for good order's sake, why don't you let me follow up with our council? We'll get that list, get it to you, and if that's something you want to publish on your website in response to the question, that's fine, or I'm not sure how else you want to communicate that.
I think probably that's not a bad idea, depending on what the committee does and what in moving this to the council for more discussion or not. That would be appropriate, I think, to put out there what the answer to what people have asked for questions.
Great.
Can I ask a question?
My question is, you said 7 to 8 trucks a day, 5 days a week. That's about a truck an hour.
Yes, I think I said 6 to 8, but yes, that would be under. Go ahead.
Well, how many of those are Bucksport trucks? So like our trash, and not from somewhere else.
Again, it depends.
So I'll
Depends on.
we usually have 3 trucks a month
Okay.
that goes to a landfill.
Right. So that's in addition to the 7 or 8.
Well, that would be inclusive. You know, what I'm saying is that under normal operations, that would be kind of the max throughput that the landfill could handle, 6 to 8 per day and 5 days a week.
So,
But obviously, economic activity could dictate that would be less than that. You know, it just depends on how much debris is being generated.
right. Yeah, historically, that's always been more than they expect. That if it's Casella that you're thinking of dealing with, they always magically underestimate the amount of trash and how long it'll take to fill something up over and over again. I've seen this. So, you know, I'm a little dubious about the numbers. And the idea of big trucks rolling down Main Street, 1 an hour, 5 days a week, every day. I mean, every week. It just sounds like a lot for such a small community. I'm worried about the air quality as a result of that. 1 truck an hour. Everything's going to blow a little bit of dust. It would barely have time to settle, and the next truck would be coming in. So I'm very concerned about it. I just thought I'd bring that up. So what region, what road are you going to come down to bring trash from other places? You're going to go down Main Street? You're going to go down River Road?
We would come in on is it 15? You have to help me on the.
About that 15. Yeah.
Yeah. So I you know, obviously that's what the main access to the landfill is, but whether it comes directly through town, I guess would depend on where the waste we're actually, which transfer station we're coming from. It could come from the other way, or it could come through town. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that all 6 or 8 of those trucks would necessarily come through the main part of town.
Right.
Okay, and can you guarantee, that the debris is being monitored and it's not gonna come from someplace it shouldn't be coming from? How does that work out? How does that work?
So because it's coming from transfer stations, those are authorized, regulated recipients of waste. They have to keep detailed records on the waste that comes in, what's being sorted, where it ultimately is disposed of. They will have to provide those records to us. The town will have rights to audit those records. So, everything is transparent. We're not, hiding what waste is going into the landfill. And we're also limited in terms of what we can accept. I mean, we as the operator could be penalized by the DEP if we accepted waste that was not allowed to be deposited into that landfill. And that license will specifically state what can and cannot be accepted.
Right, but I thought that was gonna be a third party.
Well, under contract, but AIM ultimately has the financial liability associated with what goes in there. So, AIM's responsibility would be to make sure that nothing goes in there that shouldn't go in there. If the operator is violating its agreement with AIM, then AIM's pursuit would be against them. Their action would be against the operator. But that would be done under contract. But for the town's purpose, the town should be looking at AIM as the ultimate responsible party for making sure that compliance is maintained.
Okay, so I have one more question about the business end of it.
Sure.
After 10 years, it becomes our property. What is the intention of that kind of why does it end like that?
Well, so what would happen is at the end of the life of the landfill, all capacity has been utilized. Then the responsibility is to return that landfill to kind of its previous state. So there will be, not landscaping, but there will be cover that will be planted it'll be graded, it'll be planted, it will be returned to a more pristine condition, and they will continue to be monitored for, Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 20 years post-closure of the landfill to make sure that there are no contaminants that are unexpected that are coming out of that. And if there is, there's liability to return that or to deal with that. And there are pretty significant financial obligations that need to be covered before, and it's done on an annual basis. It's reassessed on an annual basis, and financial commitments are made, which cost money, obviously, to make sure that there's adequate funding available to deal with that post-closure monitoring of the facility. So,
Okay, and then
you'll see a green or treed landfill that's been covered, and you'll probably not know, other than the fact that you were here when it was operating, that was a landfill, and there will be continuing environmental monitoring that takes place for an extended period after closure of the landfill.
all right. So fiberglass and possibly lead paint is going to be airborne, a little. I mean, just given the reality of shipping it around, it's going to be out there for 10 years. And then if people start getting sick, you'll be there for them. If they become, I mean, I know that area there was toxic to begin with, and that the water, I question the water, whether it's drinkable, and how many people around who lived around there got sick in the past, and that this, and maybe not AIM. I have a lot of respect for AIM's CEO. I've read about him, and it's a good businessman. I don't have any trust in Casella just putting that out there. That they'll do anything, that they'll actually do what the law requires. So those are my concerns. And thank you for answering my questions.
No problem. Thanks for your questions.
Folks, want to run? Sure. We are running up on time, though. We have the.
This will be short.
Okay.
What percentage of the cash flow does Bucksport get?
Of that would be negotiated, tipping fee per ton for every ton of trash that went, construction and demolition debris that went into that facility. That would be monitored by scale slips and weights.
So right now you don't have a percentage then. $1,000 get in, you don't have a percentage on what you're gonna get.
Generally speaking, it's so many dollars per ton.
I understand that.
And as I outlined it, my estimate was $2 a ton. That's a negotiated amount that, for the 1.54 million tons of waste that equals that many cubic yards would net to the town about $3,080,000.
So what are they paying a ton to dump it?
As I said, this is a discussion prior to negotiation. I don't know the cost of what they're dumping or the cost to them to operate and insure and take care of the liability portions of it. I don't know any of that information right now. My estimate was based on my prior knowledge from being in another community that had a landfill that we negotiated a per ton tipping fee on for the benefit of the community. That was how it was. It wasn't based on the percentage of what they charged because it became a complicated item when factoring in the cost to them of the millions of dollars that have to be set aside for post-closure activity as well as all the costs of operation. So we did it. Every community that has a landfill has the ability to negotiate a host community benefit. And that's in essence what this would be, even though the town would be the technical owner of that site.
So right now, the town is gonna get $2 a ton.
That's the estimate. It's not, there's no negotiation that's happened, but that's the estimate that,
We're just deciding whether to move it forward and have more discussions to get into the negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
Folks on the committee, what's the pleasure? Any further questions or?
I think it's, from what we've learned tonight, it's definitely worthy of taking this to the council for further discussion. I'd make a motion to send it to the council.
Motion second. Questions? All those in favor? Okay.
Motion adjourned.
Yes,
thank you, David. If you
that's
could get me the
September.
information that you discussed, that would be very helpful.
I will follow up on that. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for letting us participate in this.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
I'm going to hang this up.